less vegetarian, eating lower, and if they use meat, it's small, not the main part of the meal, and they're healthier from that. Where they're not in poverty, they're healthier. Poverty is poverty, yeah.
So there's an architect in New Zealand who's got your namesake. And one of the things he talks about is that labor is a renewable resource. One of the things that happens a lot in the sustainable community that you hear a lot is getting things more efficient, and a lot of the times that means eliminating jobs. So what is your thinking on how do we look at that, and how do we think of policies around that issue?
Right. Dr. Alexander, who I went to Kerala with, he was a department head of agriculture at Cal Poly in California, but he also was a Quaker man and worked with Food First. And him and I was there 2 months with him in Kerala. Such a brilliant, beautiful man, but he would look around and just laugh about Kerala's culture because everything was inefficient. And he says, it's the greatest thing, because ecosystems are not designed to be efficient. It's like, why should we be like worrying about being efficient? He said, not resource efficient, but time efficient is what we say. You know, our culture wants to be, get the most for the amount of time we invest, or the most for the money. But in Kerala, what they're short of is resource, so the resource efficient is very high. But they're not worried about time efficiency because they have a lot of time. So you're supposed to meet someone and they didn't come. Well, why didn't they come? They're supposed to drive a bus, you know. We're important Westerners, and they didn't show up. Well, their child was sick. It's more important for them to take care of their child than to come and drive some foreigners over someplace. So everything happens slowly. And by being slower, you don't burn up so much resource. It just slows everything down. So part of it is like not being afraid to do the labor. I thought when I was an engineer, I was theorizing, I'm going to go back to the land. But I'm going to be the planner. I'm too smart to farm. And when I started growing food, I realized how hard it is and how many variables you have that are not in your control. So as an engineer who can design top secret electronics, like I find farming a bit more challenge. It's very challenging. You're challenged all the time. It's a beautiful challenge. So like not being afraid of getting dirty, you know, and then we'll do this labor, but it's not a horrible thing for us to do work that's like hand work. You know, if we do it with love and presence, then I think the things like we don't have to worry about working less and not being so fast with everything. We can kind of slow it down a little, still be productive, not be wasteful. But I think there's a way to like have full employment by us all working less. Volunteer. If you don't need the money, like I could get money for what I know how to do. But if I find there's one person who could do it, who needs money when I don't, I'd rather them take the money for the job than I'll do something that no one will ever get paid. You can't pay too many people to do what I do. Talk about degrowth. Like, who's going to hire you to do that? You'd have to be a fool. Do you have any other questions right here?
Thank you so much for your talk, Jim. What I hear is based on a quote you shared early in the talk, which is about how you see everyone as ultimately caring. That you don't see anyone, you know, you identify, your vision of humanity is that ultimately everybody cares deep within them for something, someone. And in light of that, I guess I just wanted to ask, in these 12 numbers that you're asking us to reflect on, if we think about a culture of care, which I really hear coming forth in your talk, the one in terms of population, in terms of this kind of reflection on every family should be focusing on one child or less, or adoption. I really appreciate the reflection on adoption, but I wonder if we're looking at cultivating a culture of care, and the family is very much a part of that, then I can understand a response to patriarchal culture, but I guess I wonder, you know, a family of I mean, you grew up in a big family, I grew up in a big family, and I think of that. It could be 3 or 4 siblings, and I think that can be a dynamic culture of care that can bring awareness, that can bring to the world in ways that I think are profound. So I guess I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, you know, my mom, with 9 kids, you know, she'd say, which one of your siblings did you wish wasn't born? And so I say, once they're here, all you can do is love them, you know, and then, but when you think about the numbers, like arithmetic is not an opinion. You know, I heard Amory Lovin say that. So when you just look at the numbers of population demographics, you know, me having 2 or 3 children, if ever others repeat that, we're looking at 3-child families, we're down to 1.17 acre footprints to have sustainability. That's like 1/10 of Afghanistan currently. Because we built the ecological house of cards so high by not heeding the message of it in the 60s even. So, you know, Bill McKibben wrote a book, Maybe One, about 1-child families. And what I see with our son, I don't think he's, you know, McKibben's research shows that single-child families are not spoiled. That was research done in the 1800s that was very poorly done. And children-onlys are, on average, do a little better than average. They don't have sibling rivalries. They aren't as competitive in that way. They have a lot more engagement with adults, so they don't have the peer orientation where they have to, like, get away from their parents because they make a nice connection often. And so they can be balanced and nice, you know, and have a good, like I know people with 2 or 3 kids, and I see what happens when our boy goes over there. They're used to a lot of hankering and a lot of sibling stuff, which our boy doesn't get, that teasing, the meanness. So I don't know, but I think we have to invent a new culture now, so we have to have more play dates with our boy to be with those other families, and it's a community, so our family doesn't have to be our biological family. You know, it can be a wider, like takes a village to raise a family. It's a nice slogan, but it's also, we chose our town because there's like our midwife delivered 1,000 children in home births in our community. So those are 1,000 women who want a different life. You know, so we have that all around us is in where we live. So our boy will be exposed to a lot of, I loved growing up with a bunch of siblings. It was fun, but I can understand now. That's my it's not even, I don't feel it a sacrifice in any way to only have 1 child. And if that's our sacrifice, that means all the future generations. If we don't do that one, we're really pickled. If we don't go to really small, to 1 or 2 child families over the next 100 years, we're in deep doo-doo. But the trend is happening without us doing anything. That's what's exciting. All the places where they eradicated poverty, the women are making a choice already to be under 1-child family. And so it's going to happen so naturally. So if we encourage it, instead of telling European women, like some European countries, every banker, every business person, you know, wants you to have a lot of kids, and they want you to be a consumer. All the government is going to reflect what the business community wants. So the governments are pushing people to have more families, trying to give them all these incentives all around Europe because they want to get the population up. They say, who's going to take care of the old folks? It's the most selfish reasons they want to try to stimulate the women to have more kids right now when it's already happened. So what I'm trying to do is get the word out that we have to make this happen, the transition. And it's so loving. Because our boy's not suffering. Like, I didn't want to have a kid for my whole life until I was 50. Because I said, when there's not a single hungry child in Brazil on the streets, then I'll have another child. When every child already here has enough love, then I'll make another one. Until then, I don't need to make one. I didn't need to see my genetics running around. You know, there's nothing, I'm not so great. There's nothing in me that I want to see running around on the planet. Like, that's not why, you know, my sweetheart wanted to have a child. And I spent 5 years deciding. And she said, if you don't want to have a child, then we're going to split up at some point. And so she gave me the time, never pressured me, and then I realized we had a really beautiful relationship. And I said, well, let's do it, you know, let's be a family. And it, you know, but every person's going to have their own reason. But I feel it's really an imperative right now one is not the magic number, but, you know, not 3 or 4 right now. It's just tough. If you already have 3 or 4, love them to death. Don't feel guilty or bad. My mom never felt guilty or bad about all her kids, and she gave my book away to like 200 or 300 people. She was like my best promoter. She's right wing, you know. She's like so right, conservative, but every single bit of it she relates to. You know, my book was first year reading for the kids at Longwood University. Like 1,200 freshmen had to read my book down in Virginia. And these kids are growing up in coal mining families. And so they get the book in the summer, they got to read it. So I'm talking to this woman, she's like 4th generation coal miner, and her grandma read it. And her grandmother reading my book said, that's how we think. Coal miner family. So What I'm talking about is very commonsensical, making beautiful decisions from our heart for the good of all.
Some of those
Way back there.
Thank you. But it is imperative that we think about those decisions of having children, 1 or 2 children are adopted, which I'm a proponent of, when we are at our genetic best. And it's selfish to have children over the age of 45 as men, because you contribute to psychiatric issues and autistic issues. And when women wait over the age of 40, they are in a prime of their lives, education-wise, profession-wise, and many of these children end up in daycare, back into daycare. So the reality is, when you have a child at 52 years old, while this was your choice, you're doing after 4 or 5 careers, your child may only have 1 career when they then have to say goodbye to you. And the other thing is, talk about carbon footprint. What is the carbon footprint of each state when we have to incur costs for OT, PT, speech, autistic care, for all these children, for men, for contributing sperm over the age of 45? It's astronomical. That should be a slide. Have children, have 1 or 2, but have them younger when you are genetically capable of doing that.
Yeah. Well, you know, the data, we researched that pretty good. So, you know, and there's tests you can do. So we did that. There's a lot of precautions that you can take, and but I hear what you're saying, and you think it's our boy is very healthy and beautiful, so he was not affected by.
You're blessed, and you're a wonderful person.
Well, I can see the data. The data, you know, it's pretty strong data, and I know that I saw the correlations. Yeah, it's a good point. But there's some beauty about being a dad at an older age too, which I'm really loving. So, but I hear your point. Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to change the subject a bit and talk about what you did in India and tell you about an experience I had when my daughter was in Bolivia. I went to buy a pot, and we went on a bus, and we went a far way away, and I wanted to buy this pot. And then I realized that I wanted to buy a couple more to bring back. And the next day we went to the same place. And being an American, it was like, well, I bought from that lady yesterday. I should repeat business. And the woman, Sarah, spoke Spanish, and she said, we want to buy from the same lady. And the woman said, oh, yesterday I sold, and I had enough money for my family. My friend didn't have any, I didn't have any money for my family, so my friend sent me today to sell pots so that I would get money for my family. And I came home from there and just prayed that somehow we in the United States would stop being so greedy and be much more adoptive of caring for another person who doesn't have when someone else has. And I don't know if you could comment on that, but I just think that way of life is so much more beautiful. And what do we have to do to get that?
Right. Well, I felt those things over and over again in India. And, you know, I do feel it's here in America in some way. Like, I cycled across the continent twice. And so I would knock on doors sometimes and ask if I could camp in people's backyards. And one woman, she's in her 80s and in Canada, and she said, oh, sure, you can camp out there. Oh, sure, no problem. And then she says, well, are you guys hungry? It was me and my partner. And oh, well, we have some food to cook. She says, oh, I have all this leftover lasagna. It was my granddaughter's birthday. Oh, we have birthday cake. So why don't you come in? So then she's like, well, why don't you can take a shower. You know, so then we're there with this 80-year-old woman in the middle of nowhere. She says, you know, today, you can't let anyone in your door. No, but thank you for sharing that story. Okay, I think we need to end here, so thank you very much, everyone.